Hello, welcome to join me here reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Yesterday, Harry was in his first Quidditch match, and you remember that there was that very accurate picture of what Harry would look like in real life. And remember, his broom started moving around violently, and somebody thinks that someone is jinxed the broom, and they think it's Professor Snape. Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape was in the middle of the stands opposite them. He had his eyes fixed on Harry and was muttering non-stop under his breath. "He's doing something. Jinxing the broom," said Hermione. "What should we do?" "Leave it to me." Before Ron could say another word, Hermione had disappeared. Ron turned the binoculars back on Harry. His broom was vibrating so hard it was almost impossible for him to hang on much longer. The whole crowd was on their feet, watching, terrified, as the Weasleys flew up to try and pull Harry safely onto one of their brooms. But it was no good. Every time they got near him, the broom would jump higher still. They dropped lower and circled beneath him, obviously hoping to catch him if he fell. Marcus Flint seized the quaffle and scored 5 times without anyone noticing. "Come on, Hermione," Ron muttered desperately. Hermione had fought her way across the stand where Snape stood and was now racing along the row behind him. She didn't even stop to say sorry as she knocked Professor Quirrell headfirst into the row in front. Reaching Snape, she crouched down, pulled out her wand, and whispered a few well-chosen words. Bright blue flame shot out from her wand on the hem of Snape's robes. It took perhaps 30 seconds for Snape to realize he was on fire. A sudden yelp told her she had done her job. Scooping the fire off him into a little jar in her pocket, she scrambled back along the row. Snape would never know what had happened. It was enough. Up in the air, Harry was suddenly able to clamber back on his broom. "Neville, you can look," Ron said. Neville had been sobbing into Hagrid's jacket for the last 5 minutes. Harry was speeding towards the ground when the crowd saw him clap his hand to his mouth, although he was about to be sick. He hit the field on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell into his hand. "I've got the snitch!" he shouted, waving it above his head, and the game ended in complete confusion. He didn't catch it. He nearly swallowed it. Flint was still howling 20 minutes later, but it made no difference. Harry hadn't broken any rules, and Lee Jordan was still happily shouting the result. Gryffindor had won by 170 points to 60. Harry heard none of this, though. He was being made a cup of strong tea back in Hagrid's hut with Ron and Hermione. "It was Snape," Ron was explaining. "Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering he wouldn't take his eyes off you." "Rubbish," said Hagrid, who hadn't heard a word of what had gone on next to him in the stands. "Why would Snape do something like that?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at each other, wondering what to tell him. Harry decided on the truth. "I found out something about him," he told Hagrid. "He tried to get past the 3-headed dog at Halloween. It bit him. We think he was trying to steal whatever it's guarding." Hagrid dropped the teapot. "How do you know about Fluffy?" he said. "Fluffy?" "Yeah. He's mine. Bought him off a Greek chappie I met in the pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the—" "Yes?" said Harry eagerly. "Now don't ask me any more," said Hagrid gruffly. "That's top secret, that is. But Snape's trying to steal it." "Rubbish," said Hagrid again. "Snape's a Hogwarts teacher. He'd do nothing of the sort." "So why did he just try and kill Harry?" cried Hermione. The afternoon's events certainly seemed to have changed her mind about Snape. "I know a jinx when I see one, Hagrid." Oh, I don't need to read Hagrid's voice for that. "I know a jinx when I see one, Hagrid. I've read all about them. You've got to keep eye contact, and Snape wasn't blinking at all. I saw him." "I'm telling you, you're wrong," said Hagrid hotly. "I don't know why Harry's broom acted like that, but Snape wouldn't try and kill a student. Now listen to me, all 3 of you. You're meddling in things that don't concern you. It's dangerous. You forget that dog, and you forget what it's guarding. That's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel." "Aha," said Harry. "So there's someone called Nicholas Flamel involved, is there?" Hagrid looked furious with himself. Chapter 12. The Mirror of Erised. Christmas was coming. One morning in mid-December, Hogwarts woke to find itself covered in several feet of snow. The lake froze solid, and the Weasley twins were punished for bewitching several snowballs so that they followed Quirrell around, bouncing off the back of his turban. The few owls that managed to battle their way through the stormy sky to deliver posts had to be nursed back to health by Hagrid before they could fly off again. No one could wait for the holidays to start. While the Gryffindor common room in the Great Hall had roaring fires, the draughty corridors had become icy, and a bitter wind rattled the windows in the classrooms. Worst of all were Professor Snape's classes down in the dungeons, where their breath rose in a mist before them, and they kept as close as possible to their hot cauldrons. "I do feel so sorry," said Draco Malfoy one potions class, "for all those people who have to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas because they're not wanted at home." He was looking over at Harry when he spoke. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled. Harry, who was measuring out powdered spine of lionfish, ignored them. Malfoy had been even more unpleasant than usual since the Quidditch match. Disgusted that Slytherin had lost, he had tried to get everyone laughing at how a wide-mouthed tree frog would be replacing Harry as Seeker next. Then he'd realized that nobody found this funny because they were all so impressed with the way Harry had managed to stay on his bucking broomstick. So Malfoy, jealous and angry, had gone back to taunting Harry about having no proper family. It was true that Harry wasn't going back to Privet Drive for Christmas. Professor McGonagall had come round the week before, making a list of students who'd be staying for the holidays, and Harry had signed up at once. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all. This would probably be the best Christmas he'd ever had. Ron and his brothers were staying too, because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania to visit Charlie. When they left the dungeons at the end of potions, they found a large fir tree blocking the corridor ahead. Two enormous feet sticking out of the bottom, and a loud puffing sound told them that Hagrid was behind it. "Hi, Hagrid. Want any help?" Ron asked, sticking his head through the branches. "Nah, I'm all right, thanks, Ron." "Would you mind moving out of the way?" came Malfoy's cold drawl from behind them. "Are you trying to earn some extra money, Weasley? Hoping to be a gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts? I suppose the hut of Hagrid's must seem like it's a palace compared to what your family's used to." Ron dived at Malfoy just as Snape came up the stairs. "Weasley!" Ron let go of Malfoy's robes. He was provoked, Professor Snape," said Hagrid, sticking his huge hairy face out from behind the tree. "Malfoy was insulting his family." "Be that as it may, fighting is against Hogwarts rules, Hagrid," said Snape silkily. 5 points from Gryffindor, Weasley, and be grateful it isn't more. Move along, all of you." Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle pushed roughly past the tree, scattering needles everywhere and smirking. "I'll get him," said Ron, grinding his teeth at Malfoy's back. "One of these days, I'll get him." "I hate 'em both," said Harry, Malfoy and Snape. "Come on, cheer up, it's nearly Christmas," said Hagrid. "Tell you what, come with me and see the Great Hall. Looks a treat." So Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed Hagrid and his tree off to the Great Hall where Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick were busy with the Christmas decorations. "Ah, Hagrid, the last tree. Put it in the far corner, would you?" The hall looked spectacular. Festoons of holly and mistletoe hung all around the walls, and no fewer than 12 towering Christmas trees stood around the room, some sparkling with tiny icicles, some glittering with hundreds of candles. "How many days left until your holidays?" Hagrid asked. "Just one," said Hermione. "And that reminds me, Harry, Ron, we've got a half hour before lunch. We should be in the library." "Ah, yeah, you're right," said Ron, tearing his eyes away from Professor Flitwick, who had golden bubbles blossoming out of his wand and was trailing them over the branches of the new tree. "The library," said Hagrid, following them out of the hall. "Just before the holidays. Bit keen, are ya?" "Oh, we're not working," Harry told him brightly. "Ever since you mentioned Nicholas Flamel, we've been trying to find out who he is." "You what?" Hagrid looked shocked. "Listen here, I told you, drop it. It's nothing to you at that dog's garden." "We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is, that's all," said Hermione. "Unless you'd like to tell us and save us the trouble," Harry added. "We must have been through hundreds of books already, and we can't find him anywhere. Just give us a hint. I know I've read his name somewhere." "I'm not saying nothing," said Hagrid flatly. "Alrighty, thanks for listening. Oh, Christmas at Hogwarts, isn't it sweet? Ho, ho, ho."